Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "The Truck Can't Be Drivable." A little over 10 years ago, my dad's truck from the 80s began have frame issues and probably wouldn't pass the next inspection, so my dad bought a second one with body damage from a junkyard. Exactly the same, except it was red and four-wheel drive. He planned to chop his yellow two-wheel drive and that one together into one truck and convert it to a four-wheel drive at the same time. So he put both trucks up in a buddy's garage. His buddy professionally fixes old cars and resells them. His garage had equipment to lift cars in the air and everything, and bought a new truck. It was new to him, but it was still over 10 years old. My dad wanted to take the truck off the main insurance because he felt there was no point if it would be off the road for several months, but it would still carry the state-required minimum through some $20 a month company or something. The lady at the insurance company refused to take the truck off the insurance without proof that it wasn't being driven. She said it had to be in undriveable condition. My dad showed her the paperwork he'd filed with his buddy to rent garage space. She told this because the truck was theoretically drivable, it couldn't be taken off the account unless we wanted to cancel the whole thing or prove it. So my dad did what any reasonable person would do. He went to the garage and pulled the wheel off the truck and took it back with him the next day. He says a different lady dealt with him and she was willing to take the truck off the plan pretty easily, but he made sure to point out the steering wheel on the chair next to him, and how that clearly proved the truck couldn't be driven, as requested by her coworker. My dad is full of stories like this. His high school let students go home for lunch, and one day a cop told him to get to school or go home when he was walking back. He chose to go home and cited the cop as his excuse the next day. I love my dad so much, hopefully you enjoy him too. The next one is titled, "Cheeky Grandfather Gets a Free Table for My Grandmother." Many years ago, I think late 1940s, but I could be a decade off, my grandfather was a carpenter working in a beer factory. Though he was good at his job, he was known for having a difficult character. If a boss came looking at his work, he'd ask him to please close the door from the other side. One day, his boss came to see him, and asked him to build him a specific kind of table to take home with him. They were quite fashionable but expensive, so he'd save a lot of money by just having it done by my grandfather at his job. He was the boss and these were different times, so it wasn't something grandfather could protest about. He started work, but then his boss and the even higher-up boss came looking. The boss's boss liked the table very much, so he ordered him to make another one for himself. My granddad went to work, and when both bosses came back when they were finished, they were surprised to see he had made not 2, but 3 tables. My grandfather simply said, "My wife will want one of those tables as well." The bosses laughed, and told him sure, if he could get it out of the gates. They were convinced he couldn't get the 3rd table out of the factory, as he was a lowly carpenter that walked to work every day, and not one of the higher-ups that could arrange transportation. So my granddad did just that. He loaded the table on his shoulder, walked to the gate, and set the table down. He called out to the guards, "Hey guys, this table is bloody heavy. How about a beer after all this hard work?" The guards happily provided him with a beer which they drank together, and when they finished he loaded the table on his shoulder again, and walked through the gates without any problems. The next one is titled, "You Want to Know Everything?" My grandmother, Oma, is a woman you do not want to cross, and performed one of the best MC instances in my family. My Opa, her husband, worked for a well-known US telephone company that pretty much had a monopoly 50 years ago, and Oma was a stay-at-home wife with young kids. Early in their marriage, Opa would call home several times a day to check up on her. He came from an Italian-American family and his mother was very controlling. If he called and she was out to market, he'd keep calling every break until she picked up. He claimed he just wanted to make sure she was okay. This went on for a few weeks until Oma had enough. So one day, she called his office before he could take a break, and his coworker picked up. "Oma, is Opa available?" Coworker, "No, would you like me to get him?" Oma, "No, but please share this message with him. Let him know that I'm going to the grocery store for an hour, so he needn't call." Then, I will fix lunch for myself and the kids. I'll need to give X a bath after that, because she's a messy eater. I've been constipated lately, so around 2 o'clock I plan on sitting on the pot for a while and taking an enema, so if I don't answer the phone, that's why. Have him call if he really needs anything. Apparently he came home that evening red-faced, and never called home to check up on her again. The next one is titled, Call Every Time You Drive. The story about Grandpa checking up on Grandma made me remember this. My mum likely had narcissistic personality disorder, never diagnosed, and I was the oldest of my siblings. So I was the first of us kids to get my driver's license in the US at 16 during my junior year of high school. My mum was super controlling, and clearly the utter joy I felt at having some semblance of freedom was not okay with her. The first day I got my license and was ready to go to school, my mum was furious at me when I got home because I didn't call her. I was confused because I did call her when I got home from school. She worked as a doctor and so wasn't home until later. I even called her when I got to school in the morning. But oh no. In her rant she explained that she didn't just want me to call when I got where I was driving, she wanted me to call her every time I got in or out of the car. I'm sure some of this was just natural parental worry about your child driving, but my mum was also a witch, and a witch about this, so I knew what I had to do. Now, as a doctor my mum's days were very busy. Seeing patients, ordering labs, writing chart notes, making and taking phone calls, etc. Yes, there are free minutes here and there, but not on any particular schedule. So I knew my mother would absolutely hate if I called her as much as she said was required. It would be interruptions non-stop for her to just say, okay, bye, each time. But, she asked. We had cell phones, but this was before texting was a thing. So my school was about 20 minutes from my house in medium traffic. I went to private high school where SOF senior students had an open campus, i.e. we could leave when not scheduled in class. We also had a 15-minute mid-morning break, and a 45 to 1:15 lunch depending on the day. Making the most of my new rule, I said goodbye to my mother in the morning and called her 20 minutes later from the school parking lot. Then, at 10 a.m., I decided to make the most of my break and get a coffee. Hi Mum, I'm going to Starbucks. 10:02 a.m., hi Mum, I'm at Starbucks. 10:08 a.m., hi Mum, just leaving Starbucks back to campus. 10:10 a.m., hi Mum, I'm back on campus. Then for lunch. Obviously I'm going off campus because I have my driver's license. 12:15 p.m. Hi Mum, I'm going to the deli. She couldn't even make it one day. Daughter, why do you keep calling me? Stop calling me, this is ridiculous. But Mum, you said I had to call you every time I started driving and every time I got where I was going. No, I didn't. That's stupid. Stop interrupting me, I'll see you at home. And just like that. No more calls. The next one is titled, Following Instructions, Exactly, as a Secretary 1970. In 1970, this was back when lawyers had secretaries and secretaries were expected to do all office menial tasks from typing to filing and coffee serving. I was a 19-year-old new secretary in a huge law firm that handled all the West Coast litigation for a big insurance company. Our insureds were large municipal governments, telecom, performers and movie corporations. My boss was the head lawyer in the firm and he could not bear stupid mistakes. The company also had a secretary pool that did a lot of the tasks, like dictation, so I worked there for a long time before I was asked to do any transcription. One afternoon my boss told me that he needed me to transcribe some depositions for him right away. We were using the old dictaphone wax recordings and the quality was always iffy, at best. My boss's only admonition was to be sure that you type this exactly as spoken, don't change or correct anything. So, I put on the headset, stepped on the pedal and listened. The man on being deposed told his story about being hit by a city bus. This is what I typed. Lawyer's voice says, Mr. X, please, in your own words, please tell us exactly what happened on the day of the accident. Mr. X responds, well, I was going down the road and thesa bigger bassa coma downs da road and thesa bassa justa heat me. Maya weefa she justa stood there and screamed and cried. She musta thoughta that I was data. And this went on and on, he first, the sweet Italian wife after. It was perfect, and it read like a radio play. When complete, I took this to my boss's office. He looked at me sternly and said, "You transcribed this exactly as spoken, right?" "Oh yes, it is exactly as they said it." I left the office, closed the door and returned to my desk. In a few minutes I hear a huge laugh coming from the boss's office. A couple minutes later another lawyer enters his office and they both laugh. Few minutes another enters, and on and on. When the crowd left his office, and things had settled down, my boss came out and explained that he thought he knew what had happened, and maybe he should not have said exactly as spoken. I redid this, without the accent. And while my intent was not malicious, the effect was the same. My boss was more careful with his instructions from then on. The next one is titled, Old School Teamster Using Brakes as a Weapon. I was hired at a LTL freight company in a major metro area. I start at 10:30 a.m. If I were to take my breaks as scheduled, it would disrupt getting the job done. I usually have 18 to 24 stops. I need to make deliveries safely and quickly as possible, as some customers close at 3 p.m. and I have to pick up shipments en route, then continue making deliveries until they are done. Don't always get all delivered. I have to make pickups from other customers who close early. To get this all done, I can't take my 12:30 coffee break. If I take my 30 minutes lunch break as scheduled, I would never get it done. I bring a small cooler with food and drink so I don't have to stop the mission. It takes 7 to 8.5 hours to get it done. Then I take the 45 minutes of breaks before returning to the terminal. I had been doing this for months and all was well. One day the terminal manager asked why it took me so long to get back after my last stop. I explained what I had been doing. He told me going forward if I skipped a break I would lose it, and I was to return to the terminal directly from my last stop. I am a teamster. First priority is the customers who pay my wages. But I will never give up the breaks I have earned. We have work rules. Breaks are to be taken where you have a restroom and hot food is available. So okay boss, you will get what you asked for. Next day when it is time to take my first 15 minutes break at 12:30, I call in to tell them I am going to where I am going to take my break. I called when I got there and told him I am starting my break. 15 minutes later, call-in break is over, heading to my next stop. Same thing for 1/2 hour lunch. This put me about an hour and 15 behind my former schedule. A lot of customers close at 5 p.m. I have their phone numbers. Some waited, some did not. I missed 3 pickups and 2 customers who were expecting their goods 600 miles away tomorrow were not happy. The terminal manager told my union steward I was using my breaks as a weapon. This issue was never resolved the way the boss wanted for me to skip my breaks. The boss had to figure a different way to get it done. Me thinks he doesn't like me anymore. The next one is titled, You Want the Car Back? Here. When I was in college, my old car broke down. I lived 2 hours from my hometown, so my mum insisted on buying me a car. I would have been fine with another old beater, but she insisted on a brand new 2004 Hyundai Elantra because the payments were cheap and she thought it was safer. This was generous of her. She had been abusive in my past and this was a shocking show of generosity. I took over making the payments a little under a year later when I graduated. My dad died that year. She and my dad hated each other, but I was very close to him and an only child. It was a traumatizing death and I'd been to see him very shortly before his death. It really impacted me. He was a kind, gentle parent compared to my mum, who I was afraid of. As his only child, only living relative, I had to plan the funeral myself at 21. My mum, out of bitterness, didn't help because she hated my dad. My mum at one point a few months later told me, I don't know why you are so sad he died. He was in a hole. If you loved him so much, why don't you just give me the car back I bought you? He didn't get you a car. She gave me 24 hours to return the car to her, and hung up on me. So, that's what I did. I went to the car dealership and bought another 2004 Hyundai Elantra by myself, and had my friend follow me to my mum's house, where I promptly left the car in her driveway and drove away in my new exact replica. She was furious. What am I going to do with the car? I didn't mean what I said. Now I'm stuck with car payments on a car I don't need. She didn't speak to me for 6 months, telling anyone who would listen that I loved my father more than her and stuck her with a car payment. The next one is titled, "Hope you like your $3. So I can't give a whole lot of detail about my job, but I work at a small shop that caters to a very specific customer base. Unfortunately, we are now the only shop that does so in the entire state. Last July we switched manufacturers on one of our main products from an overseas maker to one in the United States. Because of this change, after the cutoff date of July 1st we would stop accepting returns on the old product. We sent out emails a year in advance, then 6 months in advance, and again every month after that to remind our customers of this change. We already have an absurdly lenient return policy. People in the business have a tendency to overbuy product in advance and then return what they don't use at a later date. They have 60 days to do so and get full money back with a receipt. If it's later than 60 days or they don't have a receipt, they can still get full money back on a gift card. Most people brought their things they didn't want back before the cutoff date. Those who didn't got to stare at our laminated copy of the email on the counter while I gently reminded them they had plenty of time to do so beforehand and that I could not take their stuff because we literally didn't sell it anymore. Enter K or enter K's weird nanny, personal assistant. She came in to get some items one day in October of the past year. She also came to return one single $3 item from the old manufacturer. I told Kay's poor, haggard-looking secretary or whatever she was that I couldn't take the item back and watched with sympathy as the blood drained from her face and she left the store with her purchases to stand outside the door to make what looked like a very stressful phone call to Kay to inform her. She came back in a few minutes later, phone still in hand, and mutely handed it to me. In my best customer service voice I explained to Kay that I couldn't take the item back and why. To which she responded with, "I never got those emails." I sighed and pulled up her info on the computer to confirm her email address, which was correct. But she insisted she didn't get them, and asked me to repeat the cutoff date for the returns. When I told her July 1st, she laughed and said, "Oh, well I was abroad then, and I don't check my emails while I'm on vacation. I was on my yearly European tour from June to August." At this point she began asking me about some new product that she was considering buying, as if the issue was solved, and as I stared down at the laminated email I realized she had done goofed by doing so. "Oh, you mean new product?" I proceeded to read off the details of it for her. When she confirmed I said, "How weird." That product was only described at the bottom of all of our reminder emails about the change in manufacturer and cutoff date. I promptly got hung up on. You would think the story stops here, but no malicious compliance has happened yet, has it? I gave Kay's sad, unappreciated nanny whatever backs her phone and dusted my hands of the matter and didn't think about it for a week. Good things never last, and my boss approached me some odd days later to ask about my encounter with Kay. Apparently, Kay had gone to upper management to witch about me not taking the return. I got to see the emails where she whined that it was only 3 months late, what the duck, and we were being unfair. Never mind that the product was only worth $3, she wanted her money back. And of course, because my boss's boss, colloquially called the boss in my department, was a typical "the customer is always right" boss, so she wanted us to return the item and give Kay her money. My boss was furious. Not with me, but with the boss, and KK was and still is a constant thorn in our sides at the shop, so this wasn't a first-time offense for her or bit of kissasery from the boss. My boss stewed over the matter for a few more days, still exchanging emails with Kay to resolve the situation, until one fateful Friday. That Friday, my boss comes sprinting out of her office just after lunch and slams a gift card down on the counter in front of me, grinning from ear to ear. When I ask her what the hell it's for, she just says, "It's a surprise." So I'm left with this gift card sitting by my register for the remainder of the day. Then, about 10 minutes till close, I almost jump out of my skin as Kay herself, not her whatever assistant, comes storming through the front door. She huffs that she has come to return her item, and with a barely restrained smirk I trade her the gift card for it, now noticing the little sticker on the back that reads $3 and some odd change. I manage to keep a straight face until she leaves before I burst out laughing. You see, Kay lives on the other side of the state, in the middle of an upper-class area that is in the center of a mountain range. The drive to our shop, the only one of its kind in the state, would take a minimum of 4 hours in good weather and good traffic, which we certainly didn't have either of in late October. When my boss had come flying out of her office to joyfully give me the gift card, it had been just after noon. We closed at 6. It had taken Kay 6 hours and probably a ton in gas to get this return done, all for $3. I hope she was pleased with herself. The last one is titled, "You Are Eating Too Little." This is not my story but a short one my parents told me the other day. When my parents were recently married and moved in together, my mum was the one in charge of cooking. She is one of those people that doesn't eat that much. So when she served dinner she would serve my dad more than her, sometimes even almost double of what she would eat. My father noticed this and was kind of concerned. He has always been a grandpa at heart and wants everyone to eat a lot. He is also the kind of person you might think they're angry when stating their opinion if you don't know them, and told her sternly, "Darling, you are eating too little. This cannot be. Tomorrow I want you to serve yourself the same as you serve me." My mum didn't say a thing and just nodded, and changed the topic of conversation. The next day when my mum served dinner there were 2 little plates on the table with even less food than she would normally eat. My father was shocked. "What is this?" My mum just smirked and told him she just did what he asked for, and thanked him because that allowed her to cook less. They both laughed, and from that day on my father knew better than to criticize my mum's cooking. Thanks for listening.